Good morning, everyone. With us here today is Connecticut Representative Tammy Nuccio, or as my Italian grandmother would say, Nuccio. Good morning, Representative Nuccio. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's NCOIL one-on-one interview.
Thank you very much. And thank you. Everybody always asks me that, is it Nuccio or Nuccio? And I'm like, listen, I'm married into the name. It's Nuccio, though. If you're
There you go. All right, so let's hop right in here. I would like to start off by asking how you first got involved in public service.
Well, very first and foremost, my kids grew up, and my youngest was, I want to say, I think she was a senior in high school when I jumped into politics, but it was 2017, and I didn't like what I was seeing in my party, and I decided that if I was going to continue to complain about it, I might as well do something about it. So be the politician you want to vote for.
There you go. That's great. And so since you've gotten involved, what issues have you really taken on and been most involved with in the Connecticut legislature?
Well, the biggest thing that I think I've done since getting involved is the children's mental health bill. That was a really big one, but I do a lot of insurance legislation. I'm really concerned with the cost of healthcare, and a lot of that's educating people on what insurance is and what are the cost drivers and how we can get our hands around them. I'm also very interested. Connecticut is one of the most expensive states to live in, so trying to pass legislation that makes Connecticut more affordable and having a way for our seniors to be able to age in place and not move to other states are all really important to me.
So it sounds like you definitely got a full plate there. I know in Connecticut, it's unique in that there's a joint insurance committee instead of a committee in each house. How do you feel that impacts the legislative process?
Well, I think it works pretty good because we're working on bills together. Like we'll have Senate bills and we'll have House bills, and then we're all in one committee, so we can kind of blend and meld, and everybody's at the table. So I think it works out well.
Do you think it would maybe get like bills passed faster because you guys are working together, or do you think it's still takes a decent amount of time?
I think you do get bills passed faster because if we're compromising on a Senate bill or a House bill, and if we can get the opposite side's members in with it, that means it's going to pass the House chamber, go up to the Senate chamber, and there's already going to be some support there. So it kind of takes that contentiousness away between the two areas. So I think it works well, actually.
Interesting. So in addition to your service on the state level, you're also involved in local politics, serving on your town council. I'm sure that's a lot to balance. How do you find a good way to do that?
Right now, it is definitely a struggle. This is my 5th year on the council. I have 1 year left, and it's a lot. Like I said, I didn't really get into politics until my children were adults. So instead of going to soccer games and stuff for school, I tend to just be submersed in legislation, whether it be at the town level or the state level. But it's a lot to balance, and it's definitely something that I'm looking at in the next municipal election year for kind of a little bit more work-life legislative balance.
There you go. That's always
good. It is good in some sense, though, because you really have your thumb on what's happening in the town, and then translating that to needs at the state level and finding people who are in similar situations. I think it does give you a little bit of a pulse on what's happening outside of the Capitol with the big shiny gold dome.
There you go. Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like you can get stay with your local roots and then translate that into your Capitol service. So that works out nicely. So I have to ask, as a New Jersey resident, if you view any conflict in between holding those two offices. It was very common here for a while, but then a lot of public pressure, interest groups had forced the legislature to ban it. How do you feel that is?
I don't necessarily think that it would be banned or anything. We actually have quite a few members of the legislation here that are either for select men, select women, mayors, on their town council, on their planning and zoning and stuff like that. I think it gives synergy to me. Like you really understand what you're doing up here at the Capitol and how it affects the towns, and then how that trickles down to affecting the residents. So I don't see a conflict. I think we all kind of watch everything really closely. I try to make sure, I work in the insurance industry. If something that comes up is going to absolutely benefit the insurance industry, I'm abstaining from it, right? I think you need that same level of ethics to know when to abstain from something that's going to directly affect your town.
Yeah. So I feel like you also said you work professionally in the insurance industry on top of all of your legislative service. How do you feel that impacts the industry side when you're looking at issues you're approaching the legislature?
Um, I think it's good because I think insurance is very, very misunderstood. I think people equate insurance to healthcare, and really they're different, right? Insurance is a product that you buy. It's a benefit that your employer offers. It is not the driver of healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are the driver of insurance. And a lot of people don't understand that. And they don't understand when you're passing legislation that's mandating something be free or something be paid 100%, what that does to insurance rates, which then exasperates what's going to happen to people who are paying for these policies. So it's a good opportunity to educate people, but it's also good because when something comes up, for instance, we're going to be looking at fertility options here in the state of Connecticut, right? I know enough about insurance to know what's actuarially included in building up a policy and what's not, and what kind of services, like when there's an appropriate time to push back, I know where to push because I've been in the industry for 25, 26 years. And I started out as a claims processor in insurance. I figured that you need to know from the claim from the ground up. So I think, again, I know where to push when pushing is appropriate, and I know when to educate when we're going to do something that is going to be extremely negative for the people.
Sounds like you got some great perspective there to be bringing to your constituents.
Thank you.
So moving on, I guess, when did you start getting involved in NCOIL and how many years you've been involved?
So I want to say this is my second year being involved in NCOIL. I got involved pretty early on. I found out about it, and I think it was my first one was the Boston meeting. So it was summer of 2021, I think.
Yeah, Boston was definitely a great venue.
It was. Well, and it was right near me, so I could drive to that one.
That worked out.
Yeah.
And then, so how would you describe your overall experience of the organization throughout this past year?
I enjoy it. I think this is the thing. Insurance, the issues that you find with insurance are national issues, right? They're not local to small towns or anything like that, or even, our states. They're national issues. And when we're talking about affordability of healthcare, or we're talking about, regulation of property and casualty, we're looking at how the NAIC looks at things. It's really best to kind of look at these with how can we affect the most amount of people that we can. So what NCOIL does is really kind of brings a whole bunch of people from all different states together, and we're looking at these issues and saying, all right, how do we put this model legislation in, and then how do we move it through multiple states so we can kind of make blanket change for industry and for the 3.6 million people, that a billion people that live in this country. So I like that it's varied groups. Nobody ever sits down and talks about Democrat and Republican, right? We all just talk about insurance, where it's like the biggest bunch of insurance nerds you'll ever meet. But I like it. It's a good group to kind of get some good ideas and do something meaningful for the country.
Great. And so this past year, you recently helped lead the Dog Breed Underwriting Protection Model Act across the finish line. Are there any issues you want to see NCOIL take on in 2023?
Well, I love the hospital transparency issue. And I definitely would like to see more around controlling healthcare costs. And there was a really fascinating talk with NAIC, which I thought was good too. And I can't remember what it was right now, but that's the thing. I sit in on all these meetings and there's something in every one of them that's interesting to me. So I think we're doing good work, and I think we just need to kind of keep continuing to push each other to do more good work.
We'll definitely have a full packed agenda coming on in 2023, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what would you say maybe is one of your most valuable takeaways of being a member, and how do you think that might tie into encouraging new legislators to get involved?
I definitely think the tie-in, like this last meeting that we were at, we had a speaker that was really talking about what Maryland's doing to control healthcare costs, or what they had done quite a few years ago. That now I just texted our chair of insurance and said, hey, are we going to revisit that Maryland thing? Like, let's look at this. So it's so valuable to see what other states are doing, and to be able to learn where they have errors, so we can refine what we want to do in the other states, and B, really kind of, again, work together to look at how can we affect this overall for all of the residents and not just kind of cherry pick what's good for the state. So I love the collaboration that we get at NCOIL. And I think if you are going to be on any kind of insurance committee in your state, it's definitely worth going to, because there's so much you can learn, almost too much. I take more notes than anything.
Fair enough. And then what would you say, maybe from the industry consumer advocate side, what are the benefits from there, as you also kind of have that perspective too?
Again, like, you know, when you're talking to people there, you're talking more about like stuff that's affecting multiple states. So I've met a lot of the advocates, and especially like with the dog breed model, we talked to a bunch of them. I've talked to a bunch on the healthcare side. I've talked to a bunch on the property and casualty side. You know, it's, again, you think about all the different levels of government that we're involved in. We can think about things at our town level, or we can think about things at our state level, but to really kind of be more inclusive, we really listen to the broader group. And these advocates do a good job of raising their issues that they're seeing, and pinpointing which state they need, you know, we would like for you to look at this. So again, good group of people.
Interesting. Great. So we're seeing a lot of polarization going on across the country on various issues. Do you see that same kind of polarization going on around insurance issues, or do you think polarization doesn't impede that much in there, or is it just the same?
Well, there's definitely polarization, right? But I don't know. I can only speak to what I see in Connecticut, and our insurance committee runs really well. From the perspective of Democrats and Republicans, like, you know, I'm the kind of person I don't care what party you're in. If you have a good idea, I want to know the good idea. If you have a bad idea, I have no problem telling you I think it's a bad idea. And I don't care which party you're in, right? Like, it's just how it works. In insurance, there's definitely going to be polarization. I think the biggest issue across the board would be, you know, Medicare for all kind of a thing. And what's the benefit of the insurance industry in that? And that definitely tends to get more polarizing. But even inside our own parties, that's polarizing. So I don't think it's a party polarization issue. It's just a how you feel about it. But I think in our insurance committee here, we tend to work very well bipartisanly, and it's kind of a point of pride for us that we do that. So I like the insurance committee here.
There you go. Do you see any of that polarization going on at NCOIL, or is that same thing kind of issue based, just depending on the issue?
I haven't seen it at NCOIL. Like I said, I've never sat down when I started talking to people from Kentucky, or, you know, the people from Michigan and that. Like, I'm never saying, are you a Democrat, you're a Republican? You know, it's just the issues, and I respect that. If we can just talk about the issue and not bring any kind of preconceived notion into it, I think you get the best work done there. But I haven't noticed it there, and I'm glad that it's not there, because I wouldn't want to be there if it was.
Great. So speaking of the issues, do you have a favorite model law or issue we've discussed throughout your time with the organization?
Well, I got to say the dog breed legislation.
That was going to be my guess.
Model law, you know, because I put so much time into that one there. So that one was definitely, it was a good experience. Also working within NCOIL, kind of learning how everything works at that level. So that would definitely have to be my favorite. And it is being introduced here in the state of Connecticut in the next legislative session.
Love to hear that. That's great. So naturally, we've discussed some of the positive things about NCOIL. Of course, there's always always steps we can take to improve. What do you think you'd like to see in the future?
You know, I don't really have a definitive on that. Like, I think maybe I struggle a little bit keeping up with everything that's happening in all the other areas. I don't feel like there's a lot of good communication on what's happening in all of the different committees. If we could find a way to kind of get that out there better, because I get that big book and then I'm reading through everything in the book and trying to find all the backup stuff in that. So I'd like to see that. That's probably the only real negative that I have, is that it's hard to kind of keep up with everything that's happening in between our meetings.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to our lightning round. These are real hard-hitting questions. So do you have a favorite all-time movie?
Wizard of Oz.
Great answer. All right. Favorite all-time food?
All right. Well, I have an Italian last name, but I'm an Irish girl. So you give me a potato in any form and fashion, and I'm happy.
There you go. I'm half and half Irish and Italian, so I can
empathize
with that.
Sicilian, Napolitan, and Irish. They're definitely something.
There you go. All right. Favorite all-time book or musical artist?
This one is like picking a favorite child. Prior to legislation, I read between 80 and 100 books a year. So
Impressive.
I cannot pick a favorite. That would be like picking a favorite child, and my children will tell you I will never do that.
All right, there you go. That's a fair answer. Favorite all-time TV show?
So this one would have to either be Last Man Standing or the original Roseanne.
There you go. All right, and the last one, 3 dinner party guests, living or dead.
My grandmother, Marilyn Monroe, and Abraham Lincoln.
All great answers. All right, so this wraps up this month's NCOIL one-on-one interview with Connecticut Representative Tammy Nuccio. Representative Nuccio, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great holiday.
Same to you.
All right.